Hello friends, the last few days have brought Poland a string of tragic news stories. These are fatal accidents, a glider crash, the death of tourists in the mountains, and the story of a 5-year-old girl whose life doctors are trying to save. These are events that have shaken society and made people think once again about the price of human error. We'll discuss everything now, so please leave a like even though the news is sad. Subscribe to the channel, friends, so you don't miss new videos. Now, let's get down to business. By the way, watch the video until the end. We'll draw some important conclusions. And of course, we'll have things to discuss in the comments. So let's get started. We have 4 news stories. The first one, we'll try to spend about 1.5 to 2 minutes on each. On June 6th, on the Voivode Ship Road number 630, number 631 in the town of Zubki in Russian, near Warsaw, there was a fatal accident in which 2 young men died. Another person is in the hospital in serious condition. According to the police, a foreigner was driving the Honda. A Turkish citizen, 37 years old, a young man. The accident happened at the intersection of Pilsudskiego and Cholezeru streets. Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The man drove in the rightmost lane of a 4-lane road, which seemed wide enough to land a plane. And as he was approaching the traffic light, he suddenly made a sharp maneuver to the left, crossed the other lanes, and collided with an Audi that was driving in the far left lane. There were 3 people in the Audi, young guys, 22, 23, and 24 years old, and the impact was so strong that the car was almost completely destroyed. All 3 were taken to the hospital in extremely serious condition, but later, unfortunately, the youngest ones, 22 and 23 years old, the doctors reported their deaths. The third one remains under medical supervision. His condition is serious, yes. By the way, the debris scattered quite a lot there, even damaging 3 more cars, 2 Toyotas and a Ford. After the accident, traffic was of course blocked. The driver of the Honda, interestingly enough, has been detained and is of course in police custody. What surprises me most is that the test showed he was sober during the accident. The prosecutor's office is investigating. Where were you rushing to? I'm by no means justifying the Honda driver, but don't you think the Audi was going too fast? Friends, write your thoughts in the comments. Yes, moving on. Now, the second piece of news. Closer to nature. Here is yet another harsh and extremely tragic reminder that the mountains are not just a backdrop for beautiful selfies. It's a force of nature, dangerous and requiring discipline. Recently, about a week ago, we discussed a 57-year-old woman who had so much life ahead but died in the Tatras. And again, a report from the Slovak Tatras. Yes, sad news has come. Over the weekend, a 25-year-old tourist from sunny Poland died. This is already the 2nd death in the region in just a few days. So, what happened? It was Saturday, June 6th. A young man, 25 years old, went to the mountains alone. His goal was the Starolesny Peak. This is a peak of 2,489 meters, and there is no official marked tourist trail leading to it. Around noon, the guy sent his family a photo from the summit. Hooray, hooray. After that, all contact with him was lost. Of course, his family started to worry. He's not answering. Obviously, it's the mountains. Something must have happened. It's unlikely his phone just died. They contacted Polish rescuers who quickly involved their Slovak colleagues. Well, there was thick fog at that time. It was hard to find a person. They couldn't use drones. And only in the parking lot at Tatranska Polianka was the missing person's empty car found. The young man's body was found Sunday morning. According to the rescuers, the young tourist fell and dropped about 300 meters down. He had no chance of survival. But the main point is this. Tourists' main mistake in June is assuming it's safe just because it's warm at lower elevations. People may be swimming in the sea elsewhere, but that's not the case in the Tatras. But at an altitude of 2,000 meters, especially on the northern slopes, there are still treacherous layers of ice. And the rescuers remind us, without winter experience and special equipment, crampons, ice axes, helmets, going on such routes is, well, not the wisest decision. By the way, a few days earlier, a similar tragedy occurred near Risi. A 50-year-old man with much life ahead died after falling off the slope in front of his companion. That's not something anyone wants to witness. The mountains are unforgiving. Yes, friends, mountains are definitely dangerous. That's why I'm more into hiking than rock climbing. God, just look at me in rock climbing, right? But the sky doesn't forgive mistakes either. Because tragic news came from the Silesian Voivodeship. It happened on Monday evening at the Bielsko-Biała airfield. Aleksandrovice. A training glider crashed at the airfield. It all happened at 7 p.m. There were 2 people on board, a young female cadet and an experienced instructor. The crew was performing a check flight. Basically, it's a mandatory part of training and assessment. before a cadet is allowed to make solo flights. So basically that's almost it. Already practically a fully trained pilot. And according to the State Fire Service, for unknown reasons, the glider crashed onto the runway from a height of 50 meters. 50 meters, well, that's a lot, right? That's not a small distance. That's half a football field. The impact was so strong that the cockpit was literally crushed. Well, and with special tools, they eventually cut it open and pulled out the victims. Despite emergency resuscitation, they couldn't save the life of the female cadet. Unfortunately, her injuries were fatal. The instructor survived, but was taken to the hospital in serious condition. And by the way, this tragedy continued the series of aviation incidents in Poland. Because again, just a few days before that, a private helicopter crashed in the Beskids. Robinson R-44, it was flying from Hungary, and there a 30-year-old pilot died. A former well-known volleyball player, Blaze Czernecki, for those who know and follow Polish sports. Well, that's it. Anyway, friends, this is a dangerous business. Pilot's license. Of course it's cool, but it's not that simple. Investigators, the prosecutor's office, and the state commission have already been on site. Well, they're figuring out what caused the tragedy, whether it was a technical malfunction or human error. We'll see. Oh, friends, and we also had, yes, another story from Władysławok. Władysławok is a small town. Yeah, that story really makes your hair stand on end. That's the story. An apartment, 11th floor. A 5-year-old girl fell from a window. The tragedy happened in one of the high-rise buildings in the Południe district. At the time of the incident, the child was at home with her mother. The mother is 21 years old. Do the math. The mother is 21. The child is 5. I don't want to say anything. That's it. The girl, in critical condition, was urgently transported by air ambulance helicopter to a hospital in Bydgoszcz. That's it. Well, and there actually the story raised a lot of questions. The investigation showed that the child's mother was intoxicated. And just so you know, the mother is not Ukrainian. She had a blood alcohol level of 1 promille. The woman was detained by the police. Well, as of the time of recording this video, no charges have been filed. Because at first, I think the woman had already sobered up after being detained, but there just wasn't any more recent information at all about what happened. What surprises me the most in this story, yeah, well, let's not wring our hands right now. Oh Lord, how could this happen? You're a mother, you're supposed to watch over your child. We'll talk more about this in the conclusions. But what's most surprising to me is that the girl survived, because that's a serious head injury. Yeah, but it's the 11th floor, that's incredible. That's at least 35 meters. According to the latest information, her vital functions are stable, but of course her condition is serious. We wish the girl good health. We wish her good health, wishing her strength, and above all, health, and of course we hope she survives. Well, investigators want to find out exactly how a 5-year-old child ended up at an open window on the 11th floor, and why was there no one nearby to prevent what happened? Yes, because in such cases, it's not about luck or an unfortunate coincidence, but about the responsibility of adults for the safety of those who cannot protect themselves. Of course, it's a controversial issue. What kind of building they have, what kind of windows, and so on. I don't want to justify anyone or accuse anyone prematurely. Let the investigation handle that. Friends, what I want to say is this. Here are 4 stories. And let's draw a conclusion, a nuanced one. I invite you to debate in the comments. I believe a person is not a computer. It's impossible to live in a state of constant risk assessment 24/7. Every parent has been distracted at least once by a phone, a kettle, or a conversation. Every driver has at some point looked at an ad, their GPS, or something happening roadside. Experienced travelers can overestimate their abilities. That's why many tragedies really happen, not because of malicious intent or some outrageous negligence, although that happens too, but because of a chain of small coincidences. Sometimes 1 second is enough, yes. You're just driving along, and someone suddenly comes at you because they simply looked at their phone, got distracted for a second, their hand was in a certain position, and they ended up in the oncoming lane. That's it. An accident? I'll say it again, it only takes literally 1 second. Of course, there's a difference between something inevitable, human imperfection, and consciously increasing the risk. If a mother looks away for 5 seconds and her child does something unexpected, that's one thing. But if the mother was tipsy, her attention, reaction, and ability to control the situation were objectively reduced, and the window was open, that's a completely different story. If a driver gets distracted for a moment, that's also a human error. But if he was speeding through the city at a pace where even a split-second mistake couldn't be corrected, that's a whole different level of risk. Actually, that's why people talk about safety. Not because someone is supposed to plan life 3 steps ahead. That's impossible. Because there are situations where the cost of a single accidental moment is so high that you have to build in a margin of safety. And still, no matter what, you can never completely rule out tragedies. In this sense, the element of fate, chance, or let's even say more of an inexorable fate really does exist. It's just that usually it doesn't appear as something mystical, but rather as a coincidence of several unfavorable circumstances at one moment in time. That's why after many disasters, people sincerely say, it could have happened to anyone. And often that's not an excuse, but a statement of fact. That's the news, friends. Thank you very much for your attention. Drop a like and leave a comment. If you're still watching, you're a true supporter. Right? Dennis watched from Bydgoszcz, Bielsko-Biała, Barcelona. Tell us where you're watching from. That's it for now. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. See you next time.